Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. To my left is Eric Eastman, the Honorable Eric Eastman.
So they say in some circles.
They don't really say that. I'd actually the first person to ever say it.
I'm
pretty
relieved.
sure.
I'm relieved.
Yeah,
You're
pretty
setting
sure.
the bar awfully high.
I know I am. I have high hopes.
Should write a song.
I should. And tonight our guest is Jordan Ulery, who's a state legislator from Hudson? No, come on.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
Hudson
I
and
got
Pelham.
it right.
Hudson
Woo!
Nashua's neighbor.
Once in a row. And he's here to talk about Article 5 of the United States Constitution. But before we get into that, a couple things. One, we had Jordan was sitting in with us on Judiciary yesterday, and I figured something out. While everybody's talking about these bills that I'm supposed to be voting on, I figured out something that was really cool. Because I always wondered that there had to be a common denominator, right? If you take a triangle, the cumulative inside angles are 180 degrees, right?
Yeah.
Then you add an angle to that, or add a side to that, I should say. The cumulative is 360.
Okay.
And then if you add another side in a pentagon, it's another 180. So all you do, if you're trying to figure out, see, I told you that's what I was doing.
Jump in on that. You can see he's been doing the math.
This is freaking cool.
It's real impressive.
So anyway, if you take a 6-sided figure or an 8-sided figure, whatever it is, subtract 2 and multiply it by 180, that's the inside. That's what the total amount there is to the angles. Then you divide it by the number of sides, and you get the inside. Like, what did I figure? A 6-sided one was the one I was curious about.
That is some high-end doodling, Gary. I got to tell you.
That's 8-side was like 135. I think
it's 180
6
degrees.
was 720 divided by 6. What's 6 divided by 100? 6 divided by 120?
I'm guessing.
Yeah, 120 degrees.
I'm guessing our audience has all got their calculators out.
Yeah, it's wicked cool, but I finally figured out how to figure out what the inside angle is on. It doesn't matter what that shape is, as long as all the sides are equal.
These are the things
And
that
I
our
thought we
host
were
does.
talking about right to know and the Ulery law.
No, that's what you guys were talking about. I was calculating this out because it's something that's always like been in my back of my mind that's plaguing me. Like, how would you know what? Because I can do the simple ones, but when it got more complex, like 5 or 7-sided or 9-sided shape, how could you easily determine that? And now I know how to do that.
Well, there are those that say that everything is math when you break it down,
Right.
including public policy.
So that's
There's your link.
you don't get the connection?
No.
No, neither.
I thought that was music was math. You know, Mozart having the offbeat and the quarter step
Oh,
down.
absolutely.
Oh, no. If you go back to the Greeks, I forget what his name was. The guy who did Pythagorean, there's actually a Pythagoreanism, which is the idea that everything is related to math.
Well,
Spiritually,
yeah,
physically,
that,
everything.
The probability that our distinguished host would have begun the show talking about angles and triangles and stuff like that are remote, I'll admit, but it's math.
It still falls into the same thing.
Well, he could
So I
have been
thought I was a
marks and
Christian until recently.
angles instead of angles.
I see your angle.
Right. That was the most important thing we had to talk about. Because then
Glad that's
after
settled.
that, last week we did a show with Bob Clegg, and he blew the doors open on something that's been hidden in the dark at the State House, because we led into it talking about Weinstein,
We did. For our audience's sake, Bob Clegg is...
former senator and he's currently a lobbyist. He was a majority leader in the House, then he went into the Senate.
Correct.
And I think he was majority leader in the state Senate also.
He was
And
indeed.
a really good guy, super honest. And we were talking about Weinstein and how people have been basically covering up for the guy for years. Everybody, it was like an inside joke that this guy was abusing women.
So he alleges. So
Right.
so this distinguished and generally very honest fellow who met with us last week does allege.
He alleges that basically the same thing has been happening at the state level by somebody who was duly elected, and people in leadership are protecting him. That's the allegation, and that's been blowing up all week long ever since.
Yeah, you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube.
No, which is pretty awesome because I think I've said on the show and everywhere I can that the biggest problem with the Catholic Church was not the priests that were abusing children. The biggest problem was when the Catholic Church tried to cover it up.
I'm not so sure the Catholic Church tried to cover it up.
They did cover it up. They
As much as they had an alternative form of treatment that was not transparent.
Correct, but it
Right.
still jeopardized more kids because they didn't let the sunshine shine on the abuse, which meant that other kids could be abused. The reason there are bad cops, I mean, there are always will be bad cops because people are human, and that isn't really the problem. It's the problem when cops gather around and protect them.
This is an issue.
Yes,
We had a rather long discussion about that yesterday, as a matter of fact.
we did. I was doing math.
When we were
Clearly.
talking about the modification to the current Ulery law, 105B14.
Correct. Right.
And for those that don't know the Ulery law, in a nutshell,
That's
does that work?
a small section of law that indicates that if a police officer has in the past made a mistake, he has an opportunity to make amends. But that fact that he did make a mistake needs to be disclosed to the other side. Because in general, New Hampshire has what is called an open folio law regarding criminal prosecution. Especially, that is, what is known to one side needs to be known to the other side, and then they make their argument based upon the same set of facts, not trying to pull a Perry Mason and suddenly come up with a surprising bit of information. Perry Mason, in case you wonder, is very
We're gonna
early,
keep going back, aren't we?
very early
1950s and 60s American TV, Perry Mason was a
Yeah.
man when it
Yeah,
came to
there's
courtroom
always
drama.
some
Barbara Hale and
Yeah.
some secret information that comes right out the end, and everybody confesses. It was actually pretty funny.
So in
Yeah.
a legal proceeding that involves a police officer who's testifying about an event, if that police officer happens to have some kind of interesting event in their past professional record of service, that has to be disclosed.
yeah,
When they testify, am I correct?
And only as applies to that one small incident, not the entire personnel file. That's immaterial to the case. But if it's a case of cruelty to animals because he stepped on an ant, well, the fact that he stepped on an ant has to be disclosed.
Well, I think that one of the testimonies they brought up, which was a good example, because they talked about medical records and how HIPAA protects them, but that's really not true. In federal case law has always held that before you put somebody away, that defense attorney has the right to any exculpatory or relevant information that's available. For instance, if in the medical records you find out that the officer is colorblind and there was something specific in the case relative to how he identified somebody, his disability, or if you want to call it that, is still relevant in the case and has to be disclosed.
Yes, it was a very good. As a matter of fact, I do not commonly agree with individuals of different party affiliation than I have, but the presentation made by Representative Birch was very, very strong.
Yeah.
Statutory law is subordinate in all cases to constitutional law. The Constitution is the bedrock law. Everything is subordinate to that. That is the law of the land. And then if you have a HIPAA law, or if you have a right to know request or something like that, those are subordinate to what the Constitution says.
Right.
And you have the U.S. Constitution, then each one of the states have their own constitutions, and they have to conform to one another, and beneath them then is statutory law.
Yeah,
So-
so if you have a statutory law that protects somebody's, in this case, their medical records, that doesn't supersede that defendant's right to defend themselves.
No, that's absolutely right. You have the right to defend yourself
Correct.
and to address your accusers.
Like, for instance, and the thing is what the problem is, and I don't think it's all policemen, but the policemen's union, I forget who they are, it doesn't matter, but they're the ones who keep fighting this because they want a double standard. If you had a witness in a murder case who happens to also have Alzheimer's, that would be relevant information before you put somebody away on their testimony.
If let's take an example of a detective finds somebody who says, "Yeah, I saw him do that." Well, maybe he did, but because of the compounding medical issue, Alzheimer's, for example,
Yeah.
then that witness is compromised, and that information should be made available to the defense side.
Exactly. And
It's not saying that the police are bad.
right.
All you're saying is that everyone is entitled to a fair and impartial trial.
It's
Correct.
called full
And
disclosure.
Yeah.
It's a fundament of the
Right to
judicial
know.
system. I would like to think.
It's
Right.
it's a fundamental that you know what the other guys have, and then let's get to the truth of this,
Yeah.
so that justice can be done. I would disagree that sometimes the police trying to protect themselves. Sometimes
I'm talking about the people that have been fighting this, revising this law for the last couple of terms have been, I think, the policemen's union. I could be wrong about that, but if we got one of these letters from them that was entirely misleading and full of balagna.
So
I think the term there from yesterday was pastrami.
No, somebody else used pastrami. I said baloney.
full of pastrami.
I was ruled out of order too.
So the short version, if I pull this off with a short version,
Here we go. Who are these?
is that
New Hampshire's
Those who are-
Policemen's Association.
that are resisting this want to remove the assurance of relevant behavior in the past record of a given officer who happens to be testifying or bringing forward evidence of some kind,
Right.
to not be compelled to be disclosed to
They
the
want
defense.
to be able to get rid of the information so that they can. See, the thing is, it's a New Hampshire Police
Okay.
Association. So my gleaning from what they've said over the years is fundamentally they want to protect the police, and they don't want. For instance, I'll give you an example. This happened. This testimony was, I think, from last term. A lot of police forces, like say in Ware, will have a police officer who does the prosecution.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a police officer. Let's say they're a lieutenant. I don't know what they all have rank, and I don't know why they need that, but they do. And you have a captain, and the captain is put Sergeant O'Malley, because they're all Irish. We know that Sergeant O'Malley is putting something in. What
No, that's
is that correct? Did I say
regional
something?
law.
Yeah, I think it's a
That's-
law.
all-
Anyway,
all police have to be Irish.
So if you watch the old Bugs Bunny and stuff like that, they're all Irish. It's wicked funny.
And they're good with the billy club. They
Yes,
swing the
they
billy
are.
club all the time.
All the time. Anyway, so
Representative, you are aware of which show that you
Yes, I am.
you do know.
voluntarily stepped onto.
Yes. So
Much to my chagrin.
yes. So Officer O'Malley did something wrong, and the chief put something on his record because he did something. Now, the lieutenant, who is the prosecutor, a lot of the chiefs were very upset with that because they didn't feel that lieutenant had a right to look into the officer's files. But under federal law, that officer has an obligation to have access to those files. And that's where one of the big problems was. And the real deal is, if he is a prosecutor, he's basically has to take an oath to protect people's information. So even though he looked at that record, unless he's breaking his oath, he can't disclose anything he's read other than evidence that is exculpatory in a particular case?
You're talking about a police prosecution case, which is normally to misdemeanor type violations. The list that we
But
were
that was
talking
one of the
about,
complaints.
That was one of the complaints, yes. The level of prosecution where this becomes more important is when there is not just a financial punishment for
Right.
speeding, but you have a situation where an individual's liberty may be impaired.
Permanently impaired, possibly,
in,
yeah.
in some case, permanently impaired. So what you do is, then you use an attorney who has taken an oath to the bar and to uphold the Constitution, similar type of oath that the three of us have taken at one time or another.
Yeah.
I believe that the police are concerned that private information about an officer may leak to the public.
Yes.
But that is not the case because it's an obligation under case law, under New Hampshire state law, under federal case law, that all information that may be exculpatory is a big word meaning helping to provide a defense to the other side.
Yeah, information that's relevant to the case.
And it can only be information that is relevant to the case. If the health record of a police officer may not even be looked at if it has something to do with whether or not the individual has told the truth or not.
Right.
That's apples and oranges, and they don't comply. So a balancing act needs to take place. And you're right. If they were all Irish, there would be no problem. But
Exactly.
the problem is, you've got Italians and you've got Swedes.
No way.
You've got,
See, that's what happened. That's where we went wrong.
You've got individuals with Hispanic heritage. I mean, no, seriously.
Let's go down
We're
this
gonna be
rabbit
in
hole a
trouble.
little further. We'll get calls.
Oh, yes, you will. You will. The fact of the matter is that the idea is to provide for a fair hearing for the defendant,
No matter what.
no matter what. The ancient saw was rather 100 men go free than a guilty man be punished, or that
Exactly.
an innocent man be punished.
Correct. That's why we have a jury has to be unanimous. You can't have a
On a
majority.
capital case or a major case.
Right.
Yes.
There's all kinds of things we do to protect, to make sure that we don't inadvertently put somebody away who is not guilty.
Because the
And this
most
is part of
important
it.
thing of a person is their liberty,
Correct.
is their freedom, is their ability to go to work in the morning, to worship on Sunday, to the things that are specified in the First and Second Amendments.
To pursue happiness and
Right.
have the liberty to do that,
As
which
it says
couldn't
in-
get more bedrock constitutional than that.
No, and that's exactly what we're talking
Okay,
about.
so now that we've transitioned into the Constitution again, let's stay there. Article 5, why do you support it? And you just went to a conference.
Yeah, I went to-
Explain before we go. Article 5, explain it simple so even the Irish like me can understand it.
That may be difficult. I don't have enough potatoes.
He's bad. He's a bad person.
Praties to you.
Oh, okay.
Praties?
That's what the Irish call them.
Oh,
Come
I
on.
didn't know that.
Get hip to your heritage.
Article
know,
5
right?
is a method of modifying the Constitution of the United States. There are two methods. The first method, and the method that has been used repeatedly in the history of the United States, is for Congress to propose an amendment to the Constitution of the United States. The process there is Congress comes up with an idea. They say, hey, good idea. Hey, you states, vote on it. Then each one of the 50 states has to vote on it, and 3/4 of the states have to agree. New Hampshire holds the distinction of being the 9th state to approve the Constitution of the United States, making it take effect,
Making it the law of the land.
making it the law of the land.
Back in the day.
Back in the day, in 1787, I believe it was.
Yeah.
9.
Nine.
It's 9,
89,
really?
Yeah.
That's when it
Because
was.
the New Hampshire Constitution.
83.
1780, yeah,
1783.
earlier than that. But the other way, James Madison put this in, as we were talking earlier.
George Mason as well.
George Mason.
Yeah.
indicated was that the government of the United States is composed of co-equal parties. The first party are the people. The second party are the states. And the third party is the federal government. The weakest was to be the federal government. And that's not the case today. But representing most of the people are the states. Here in New Hampshire, almost anybody knows their state representative. I mean, we represent
3,000
people, or 3,300 people, something like that. Even in a large state like California or New York, it's only 26,000, maybe 50,000 people. You still have access to your representative. You can make a direct impact. And every 2 years, you get to vote for that person. So the state is a very powerful element that has been ignored, but the state still has, within the Constitution, the right to come together with other states and then propose amendments to the Constitution.
The United States Constitution.
The United States Constitution.
And that's a convention of the states.
That's a convention of the states. Here in New Hampshire, we have a decision every 10 years whether or not we're going to have one routinely. Sometimes we have one. I was a delegate to one.
Sure.
And many, more than 1 year ago. And at the same time, you don't have them. We didn't have one in the last 10 years. So you don't have them. Now there are several different amendments to the Constitution that are being proposed. There's term limits. A lot of people want to put that through because there's no way Congress is ever going to limit itself. And because Congress isn't going to limit itself, the balanced budget amendment has taken place more than any of the other ones. The balanced budget amendment says Congress is going to have a balanced budget. I have to have a balanced budget. I can't write a check for more than I got in the checking account.
Pretty simple.
State can't do that. Gary, you and I, all three of us have been at the budget where we had to come up with something that fit. Money in, money out.
It's a long debate, but at the bottom line is you have what you have.
And that's it.
And that's what you can spend.
That's all you have, and that's
Now,
all you can
there
spend.
are exceptions. We can borrow. And there should be times when you need to borrow.
Sure.
War, natural disaster, a major project that needs to take place, something like on I-93, or where we pass Garvey bonds to fund some of that to keep that construction going on.
Right.
So those things, so yes, there's the ability to bond or borrow, and with that, there's a trade-off as to which one gets paid first and all that. That's fine. But the primary thing is money in, money out when it comes down to the bottom. Money in, money out.
So you recently went to a convention of the states.
Yes, it was called by the state of Arizona. Some 29 states agreed to show up, and then Harvey hit. So only 19 states showed up.
The hurricane got in the way.
The hurricane got in the way. Other than that, there would have been a massive number of people there. 29 out of 50 states showing up.
What do you need to actually get it going?
I think it's 34 states. But understand the way this works. If 34 states submit a petition to Congress saying, we demand, or we request, a convention of the states on the same subject matter, Congress is then required by the second half of Article 5 to call a convention of the states. And the only thing that can be talked about is what was in the similar documents.
That's a key point, isn't it? I mean, I've been a student of this subject for 3 years, you a lot longer. And from what I understand, one of the most important points that can be made to people that are afraid of the unknown and may have some objections about engaging Article 5 is that those applications to Congress, also known as resolutions, but usually referred to as applications, have to be pretty much linguistically identical. They have to do something called aggregate, which means that all those applications have to say the same thing and ask for the same thing, which means we want to meet to talk about, pink ducks. We don't want to talk about brown bobcats. We want to just talk about pink ducks. If any of the other applications don't say pink ducks, guess what? They don't aggregate and they don't get counted. So it's important that that people understand that event, if it ever materializes, is only going to be an event called to talk about what? Pink ducks.
Okay, so
And that's it.
we've had, I think it was Hal Shurtleff from, what's the group he belongs to? John Birch Society.
Well, he was with JBS, but
Okay.
he's since changed his affiliation.
Oh, I didn't know that. Anyway, so Hal Shurtleff was on the show last year or the year before, and his argument was that once you open up that Pandora's box, and you have, regardless of how you manipulated it to get it to going, once you have that convention of the states, anything is open for debate, and somebody's going to come through from California and propose an amendment to get rid of the Second Amendment.
Or from wherever.
So let's just say that. Let's just say that happens. So what happens?
So the Rules
Well, that's-
Convention spoke to this.
Yes, we did. We specifically dealt with this.
Okay.
The proposed rules for the convention is very simple. You make a proposal to abrogate the Second Amendment, to rescind the Second
To
Amendment.
vacate it, basically.
I can't vote on it. I took an oath to the state of New Hampshire to talk about some pink ducks.
Right.
I didn't take an oath to vote on anything but pink ducks.
But that's only true for New Hampshire.
Well, that's fine. Every other state is taking the same oath.
Oh, they are? Is that
To-
customary or is that new?
Oh, that's very customary. Remember, you have conventions of states all the time. Remember the well, you don't remember, but the flood system that devastated Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, Rhode Island.
Right.
Sure.
That's why they took away a huge chunk of ware to build a dam,
Right.
the Everett Dam.
And what did they do? They set up a convention of the states approved by Congress. It's called a compact when it's a limited number of states. The only thing they talk about are those states
Okay.
and the fact that Massachusetts has to pay us for the
And the
property
problem with
taxes.
flooding. That was the matter on the table. Nothing else was dealt with.
Nothing else.
That's
was
the
done.
problem they were there to solve.
And that happens all across the country. It happens up on the Colorado River.
Right.
It happens up in the Cascades. It happens on the Mississippi River Valley, which is a very large number of states involved in that. Because, I mean, that goes all the way out to West Virginia, for crying out loud. It's involved in them because of the Tennessee River connecting across. But that is routine behavior. There is no runaway, as people like to say. Sure, somebody's going to bring it forward. Somebody's going to try, and it's going to be
Is it pink ducks? No.
nothing.
Nothing, right.
It'll be ruled out of order. And I'm so glad you raised that concern.
Well, okay,
Gary.
let's just take it to the next level. Because I want to make sure people understand how ridiculous an idea this is. Let's say that you didn't take that oath. Not everybody did, and it goes to the Convention of the States, and a Convention of the States comes back with an amendment to the Constitution to, they say, it has two separate amendments. One, to have a balanced budget, and two, to eradicate the Second Amendment, to cut that out of the First Amendment the Second Amendment to the. So it comes back to New Hampshire. Then what does New Hampshire do
Well,
with
it
it?
doesn't have to come back.
Let's just say it does. Just say
What
it-
happens is it goes to the federal government. The federal government then promulgates it to the states, to
Yes.
the 50 states. The 50 states then have to vote on it. And again, you need the 3/4 limit, which means 14 states will say to the Second Amendment
part of it,
part of it,
right? At least 14 would.
at least 14. You can count. You can just think of them in your mind right now. Most of the Midwest,
Even
most
Vermont
of
would
the
vote.
West, Vermont, New Hampshire, even Maine would vote against it.
That's true.
Right. So even on the outside possibility that ever happened, the fact of the matter is they still need 3/4 of the states to agree with it. So that possibility of a runaway convention where
It's limited by we, the people.
Correct.
Remember, as I said earlier, there are three sources of power in government. And it's not the three branches of government, but the three sources of power are the people, the states, and the federal government.
Right.
In this case, we're dropping off the federal government because the two most important parts are the people and the states.
Right.
And the people get to tell the state yay or nay.
Yeah, it's United States of America, not the federal government of America.
Well, up until the Civil War, the language regarding the United States was always in the plural. The United States of America are going to do that. The United States
really?
of
I
America
didn't know
are
that.
going to do this. After the Civil War, the terminology became is. But before
didn't
that,
know
it was
Did you know
are.
that?
It was plural.
No, that's a great piece of information.
That is pretty cool.
So, if I understand your explanation of the process correctly, the ratification process, the three-quarters of the states having a vote on these suggestions that might come out of a convention, is one of the most important things to consider because it serves as a filter or a firewall against crazy ideas coming
Right.
out of a convention,
It
whether
also
it
serves-
runs away or not.
More importantly than that, it serves as a firewall against a runaway Aristotelic, shall I say, establishment Congress,
Oh, it's very aristocratic. Sure.
where you have individuals that have been there for more than
30
two terms
A lot more.
who
A few.
control situations only because of the fact, well, I know and I'm a Peter Peppergast. Well,
Sure.
I don't care. No. The gas part maybe, but other than that, no. The thing is, we have an establishment operating in Congress right now, and they've forgotten to whom they report. And they report to you and I, to all of us.
Amen to that.
And reporting to us means that the states have a role, and one of the ways they can control Congress is to threaten their power. And one of the greatest threats to their power is how to divvy up the money that they get. Now, money isn't bad. We need money. We need a strong armed force. We need a good FEMA operation. These storms we just had are proof of that. We need a good national infrastructure system like the highway system, which is a benefit not only to the defense, which is the National Defense Highway System, but it's also great fun to drive across. I mean,
Sure.
yeah, it's great to go cross country on the highways. You get to see like the old Chevy commercial, see the USA.
Oh, yeah.
I did
But
that
you're
last
saying-
year on my motorcycle. You should have gone with me, you lazy.
Yeah, you're right. You've got an impressive bike, though. It can take a lot. You know?
Yeah.
Cool
So-
bike. You should see him on his bike, folks. He's a bad man.
No, I'm not. I'm actually a sissy. I don't do wheelies.
You're born to be
Did you
mild.
go to Sturgis?
I like
I
only
see you in
time.
your leather vest.
The only time.
Tough guy.
The only
My
time.
brother has a leather vest.
Well, the only time I actually go to big motorcycle I don't go to big motorcycle events. The only time I went to Laconia was on a really crappy midweek day when I knew nobody would be up there, and I went up with a friend just to look around. But I don't like being. I don't know. I get claustrophobic when I'm around a whole bunch of bikes.
It's
I-
kind of
no.
a giant county fair when you really get down to it.
It
Once
is
you
a
park
county
your bike
fair.
and walk away from it, it's just a bunch of people who like bikes walking around, going from booth to booth. And maybe
Well,
they've been
that
drinking,
part
and
of
maybe
it
they
is,
haven't.
but The old time when they had the races at the old Briar Motorsport Park.
A little different.
That was fun.
Yeah.
I did the EMS out there for many, many years and learned how to ride out there.
Cool.
Oh, really?
Yeah, with the AMR, at the time, American Association of Motorcycle
Right,
Road
right,
Racers.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that was I learned how to ride the track, and that was the old road course was a lot of fun on that. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, I like my bike just for exploring and driving around and listening to music and tooling, just mellowing out. I don't like being in big lines of motorcycles and stuff like that. I'd rather go with somebody like Crazy Man here and just go exploring.
Yeah, I like it better when he carries his broadsword.
Yeah. That happens.
That'd be cool.
That I will never live that down. One day, and
Yes,
it was
you did. It was
a
awesome.
designated day in the house. A
Yes.
designated day. One day out of 2 years.
So one day when
That
all
you
the
get
men,
to
a
wear
lot of the
kilts.
men wear skirts.
Yeah, we all wear skirts. We showed up in
Right.
dresses, and didn't even bring the broadsword into the State House complex because that would be
Offensive.
At the time,
a little
it was-
odd.
Yeah, at the time it was unapproved.
Yes.
Shall we say?
Yeah,
Shall we
That's
say.
right.
Even though
Oh.
a lot of people were carrying dirks, so
I had
Our-
a couple of those.
Our house clerk right now, Paul Smith, right? This is, I don't know how many years ago. He was, I think he was working in leadership at the time. Because I don't think he was a state legislator when I first went up there. He was in the back of the Section 4, sitting down. And I went back and I'm pretending I like going on diatribes just to see how people react to them. And I was going on this diatribe about how feminism, men becoming feminized, is destroying the country. And I started giving examples how men aren't standing up to this and standing up to that. They're not doing their job. They're not becoming men and being responsible for their families. I just went on and on and on and on. And then I ended it with this. I said, Paul, if you don't believe me, just look around the room today. All these guys are wearing skirts.
Ooh, good
And-
catch.
Oh, he got mad.
he's proud of his Scotch heritage.
Oh, I know.
That's a nice setup.
I know,
though.
but it was a wicked good setup, and it was just so. It was his.
You walked right into that.
he-
That's pretty good.
It was
No,
so
it
much
says
fun.
We don't have fun.
Oh, I have fun. I have fun.
And sometimes it crosses over, like the ball game they just had.
Oh yeah.
Softball game, $9,000 for Liberty House.
Oh
they raised a
really?
lot. There was
I
a
didn't know they-
fundraising.
Wow.
Little background is that the two major parties, and I don't know if the Libertarians had their own team.
No.
You can only have two teams,
people.
right? But had a fundraiser baseball game between the Democrats and
They were selling
Republicans.
snacks.
Yeah, they doing all kinds of things to raise money. Oh, the Libs were?
Get it? Get it? It was a joke.
Yeah, yeah.
They
yeah.
were selling Twinkies.
Of course they were.
Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah. They were selling brownies.
Oh gosh.
We love you, Libertarians. We do.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's a good public event. I would like to see that better publicized so the general public would plug into what their state legislators are doing. It's a nice event to get to know them.
yeah. Well, the nice thing about New Hampshire, when I go to these events, like I went to Arizona,
Sure.
they were. You represent how many people? You get paid how much? Yeah. And it was. You really do represent your people, don't you? Yes, as a matter of fact, in New Hampshire, yeah.
They're our neighbors. They can walk to my house.
You go to shopping at
I know the people who
Market
wear-
Basket or Alexander's or Star Market, and they're going to tap you. Why did you? Oh, I forgot. What? Oh, yeah. Well, let me explain. Oh,
I hate that when they hit you up with how you voted and you can't remember. The thing is,
I've lucked out on that one. That hasn't hit me yet. but
oh, it
I'm
has
sure
hit
will.
me. Well, the thing is because my wife does it to me. Because I'll get done. We have typically. Well, lately it's been on Thursday. It used to be on Wednesday. Thursday would come home after voting on 60 bills,
Yeah, that's
and
rough.
she'd say, "What did you vote on today?" And unless it was a couple of the key ones where there was a lot of confrontation, I have no idea. I'd have to go look at the calendar to find out what I voted on.
well, some of it is that way. And,
Yeah.
And what our audience ought to know, and the general public should know, is that it's as big a job as you make it, and there's a ton of reading if you're willing to do the reading, and if you're willing to confer with people, take meetings, and educate yourself, so that your vote is really based on facts and knowledge. And I mean, you can make it more than a full-time job. Some people do, some don't. But there's a boatload of homework that people take very seriously. Many of them do. And they
I'd say
educate
most of them
themselves.
do.
Yeah.
Most people have a good idea what they're voting on when they go in.
Yeah.
I mean, I do. I mean, I read the calendar and stuff like that. Then if there's something specific that stands out and I say, why the heck did they vote like that on this, I'll search further into it. And
Sure.
And sometimes mistakes happen because of our committee system. I remember 3 years ago, Ways and Means came up with a bill, and we voted one way on the bill. And Commerce came out with a similar bill, But somehow or another, because the titles were different, but the content was similar. And we had to make an adjustment right on the floor to make the two of them mesh together.
Right.
So that, yeah,
Because one dealt with one small section, and Ways and Means dealt with another small section, and there were different titles, different names, different.
Sure.
And it wasn't until you heard them together that you said, "Oh, wait a minute, these don't work."
right,
And we
right,
do have built-in system where we can correct that afterwards.
right.
But I will say one thing: working with the people in Arizona, there was a group of 6 of us that went. It wasn't just one of us. It was people that were appointed by the Senate and the House, representing the General Court as delegates. Went to Arizona, and we sat on different committees to discuss different aspects of setting up these rules. I was impressed with the ability of the New Hampshire people to go, enough of this bull. Let's get to the point. The point is we have to have this and this and this, and
Keeping the conversation germane to the subject at hand.
without varying off into areas, because we're used to it. We have a staff of 3, me, myself, and I in the House. The senators at least
That's
have
where
one
I
staff
have the
Yeah,
person.
advantage.
here in New
I-
Hampshire, not everybody may know it, but the reps in the House don't have a staff.
Well, no, not
Their
everybody.
own. Well, many.
I'm
of them.
schizophrenic, so I get like quite a
Oh.
few.
What a stroke of luck.
I know.
But I tell you, the ability to stand with these people, that some of whom were making, an easy high five number for salary from some of the richer states,
Doing the same job.
doing the same job for 6 months a year, Texas, instead of,
A little bit of resentment in his voice. If you ask
Yeah,
me.
just
I'm
a little bit.
guessing.
although
Don't mess with Texas now.
I won't mess with that. But it's, I was very impressed with the delegation from New Hampshire.
Well, I think you know why is because they're used to making so much money doing it. New Hampshire, you get up there, you want to get something done.
And
You're not
get out.
getting you're not getting paid to sit there.
Nope.
So get it done and get it
get
over
done
with,
what needs to get done,
and let's
and
move
don't
on.
do what doesn't need to get done.
Right.
And let's
Let's
go home, and I
let's
got to go to work.
Right. I got to go make money for Christ's sake.
We've all heard the expression, America's experiment with democracy.
Yeah.
And I think New Hampshire's a great case study for any legislator or concerned citizen from anywhere else in the country as to just what that looks like when you have the level of representation we have here. The ratios are really good. 6,000 residents per rep.
No, 3,000.
3,000.
Little over
3,000.
3,000.
3,000.
It's like
Wow, okay. So it's even better.
3,100,
300 or 100,
I don't know.
300.
And that's
Up and down
extraordinary.
depending.
It is.
It's the highest level of representation per citizen out of the whole country. And so that's democracy in action.
Yeah, I think the next highest paid state is Oklahoma at $16,000.
Next
For
lowest
two-
paid or highest paid?
Next highest paid from New Hampshire.
Yeah, oh, I see.
New Hampshire's at the bottom.
Way at the bottom.
I thought Maine was pretty low too.
You know, it was
No.
my first term. There was a bill. My first term was pretty cool because I had Mike Harrington on my left, Mike Balboni in back of me, and Bob Gaida in front of me.
Well, that explains a lot.
That does, doesn't it? And there was a bill. People might not understand, but we get paid $100 a year, and it's because it's ingrained into the Constitution. Back in the late 1800s, they said this legislature shall make $200 a year for a 2-year term.
And that was based on what?
That
at
was
the time?
that was based on what somebody should make in about a 6-month period.
An annual salary, average annual salary.
Yeah, and that's it. And so to do an end run around that, there was a bill to give us, and at the time gas prices were real low, but it was like 80 cents a mile. And so that they were trying to compensate for the fact that we didn't make much money by jacking up the price for mileage to be unreasonable. And I remember standing up and asking for a roll call, and back in the early 2000s, people didn't ask for roll calls that much. It was not acceptable. And Gaida and Mike Balboni and all the freshmen stood up with me and it was not a. I think we were booed, but we got, but it didn't pass.
Not bad.
No, geez.
Well, thanks for putting. I want to thank you on behalf of the citizens that can watch this show of New Hampshire for putting the matter of Article 5 on their radar and talking about it intelligently. You know your stuff. I'm a big fan of Article 5. As you know, I've been actively involved in that pursuit here in New Hampshire for a while. And it's important that people understand that not only is the ratio of representation very high here, but we as a state have the opportunity to really move mountains when it comes to mechanisms in the Constitution like Article 5 that really does put the power back in the hands of the people.
Well, that's the whole idea of effective representation. As I said,
Yeah.
our country is divided into threes. We've got three branches of government, but we've got three sources of power, and it's laid out in the Declaration of Independence. The very first words, "We the people." And it's
That's it.
the people, the states, and the federal government. And the federal government is there to facilitate the interaction between the states, and the states are there to facilitate the interaction between people.
Right.
I'm not talking about the fact that we don't need laws. Somebody's got to put up a stop sign. I mean, I just watched a car on Elm Street earlier today make a U-turn. I'm remembering that's what killed the state trooper. Was a U-turn that was made.
Oh, really?
Yeah, over on the seacoast. And I'm going, what? Come on, guys, pay attention. You need laws, you need rules, and you need people to accept the laws and rules. Because no law does anything, but it's the acceptance of the law that has the effect.
Yeah. Have you ever seen any of these, especially Asian countries like India and places like that, where you have these huge intersections and there are no lights. There's no real. I'm not even sure there is a law relative to the intersections, and it's like.
Well, there was, but that was before decolonization.
Oh, but anyway, there's no order to it, and it's insane. People, you're taking your life into your hand every time you get into your car.
Well, you're talking about going around the Rotary over in Keene.
It's pretty bad. Decolonization, that's a frightening word. It sounds like euphemism for something really ugly.
Well, it depends. I mean, some countries have done it well, some countries have not. Some countries have stepped up to the plate and learned lessons of what it means to give individuals their rights and their freedoms and the respect that they're due. And other countries have said, how much money can I make if I make that person into a slave?
Right.
Pretty much.
Yeah, that's basically it. It's just, I think that's what, fundamental problem is. As long as you have humans running government, there will always be abuses.
And that's why you have a bedrock law that when it limits government,
Right.
rather
That's the
than
whole idea.
granting rights to people, it limits what government can do.
Precisely.
Then you allow the individual freedom.
There's something worth noting about the drafting of the Constitution itself as regards Article 5. When George Mason proposed the idea of expanding the ability of states to get together and discuss proposed amendments to the Constitution, as well as Congress doing it, the vote that took place on adding that Article 5 language to the Constitution was unanimously in favor
Yes.
of doing so. And if I don't have my history wrong, it is the only, if not one of the only, proposals to install language to the Constitution that won a unanimous vote.
Right.
Yeah, because that back then, when they were forming the Constitution, the people that showed up to vote on it were still extremely loyal to their states.
Yeah.
And the problem we have now is the people that go to Washington are loyal to the lobbyists and loyal to power.
That's correct.
And that's all.
All the more reason for us to limit Congress when we can.
It was Clegg last week before we started talking about the abuses in the State House, was talking about Weinstein having donated so many millions of dollars to the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And Bob was pointing out that, we have people in New Hampshire that receive some of that money. And what they do with it, see, now that Weinstein's a bad guy, they probably knew that before, but maybe they didn't. But now that they think he's a social pariah, they take that money, let's say they were given $10,000 from him, and they'll give it to a charity. Well, when they do that, that is money they would have given to the charity anyway to garner favor. So they're really not doing anything different with the money than they would have otherwise. If they really were embarrassed by taking the money, they'd send it back to them, not use it for what it was intended to originally.
It's tainted money.
It's tainted money. It should be given back, not used to feather your cap and, so that, so-and-so gave $10,000 to the, women's group or something like that. Because all it does is they're using it to basically garner more favor. So they're guilty too.
Well, that's a valid point. It goes back to what was said earlier. Money corrupts, or as what Lord Acton said, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Exactly.
So you limit the source of power.
Yep.
Which was the intent in the first place of the way the architecture was set up. That's why the Constitution says what it says.
Right. It's not a declaration of limited rights or exclusionary rights. It's a declaration of human rights, that the human is going to be more important than the government at any given time.
That is the contrast between what we see in the United States and what you see in like a communist country. In a communist country, the state itself is the most important unit in that community. So therefore, individuals, the idea is that the state is the one that has our best interest in its has our best interest at heart, theoretically.
Right.
And therefore, any decision it makes is the most important. And we, as citizens, are only as good as that state is. So the state is the one with the ultimate power, and the individual citizen has no real constitutional rights. And that's how you see abuses. That's how you end up with Mao killing more than 10 million people. You had Stalin killing millions of his own people.
Well, it was mostly Ukrainians.
Well, okay, so
The starvation of Ukraine.
True.
They were growing all the food for Russia and getting none of it. And he didn't want the Ukrainians involved. He didn't want the Cossacks involved because the Ukrainians had been with the Poles and the Hungarians and fighting previously there was an ethnic union amongst those three groups, Lithuanians, the Poles, and all the way across the center of Europe there. That's the history of that part of the country.
I want to take his Euro-Asian history course because I feel that's not sarcasm. I appreciate the breadth of your
Just need to read a little
knowledge
bit.
about these things.
Just need to read a little bit. There's a gentleman up at the State House that you've all both met. That
who?
Well, this gentleman, he cannot discuss things because he's an employee of the state. But when you talk about history with him, it's quite interesting. Remember, it was Poland in the 1920s that stopped the communist invasion of Germany.
Okay.
They had Boy Scouts out there with rifles.
Yeah.
Boy Scouts, 10, 12-year-olds, fighting the Bolsheviks as they were coming across the steppes.
Wow.
And it stopped the communist invasion of Germany. You had September 11th, 1580, I forget the exact year, but it was September 11th that the siege of Vienna took place, where the Muslims came across and tried to take Vienna, and were repulsed by the Polish winged hussars. It came down off the heights and drove them off the field of the battle in front of Vienna.
Which had nothing to do with September 11th.
Oh, I'm sure it had absolutely
Absolutely
nothing to do
You would
with it.
have to know history to believe that there might be a correlation. Hey,
I think it's all about triangles.
Jordan, we got to go. Thank you very much for coming on.
No problem.
Thanks
It's
for
my
putting
pleasure.
up. Thanks for putting up with me. Well, you put up with me anyway.
I'm still hanging on, but
You're still
by my
hanging on.
fingernails. I don't know why.
We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. It's a pleasure.